a photographer, alone in the Utah desert, miles from anyone. Something found him anyway. Let's go. The high desert of Utah is not like other wilderness. The forests of the East and the Pacific Northwest are alive in a dense, layered, competitive way. Always something moving, something growing, something dying and becoming something else. The desert is different. The desert is old in a way that forests aren't. The silence out there is geological. It has the weight of millions of years of stillness behind it, and when you stand in the middle of it, especially at night, you don't feel free. You feel exposed, seen, like something very large and very patient has noticed that you are here. A solo camper named David ventured into this landscape on a photography trip. David was a professional, the kind of photographer who drove 12 hours and hiked another 8 to get a single shot of the Milky Way rising over an unlit canyon at precisely the right time of year. He wasn't the type to take shortcuts or compromise on location. He had researched his site for months. He hiked far beyond any established campground, far beyond cell signal, far beyond the polite fiction of safety that comes with proximity to other humans. He found a plateau that offered a full 360-degree view of the sky, no ambient light, no horizon clutter, nothing between him and 100,000 years of stars. He set up his tent and his tripod and felt genuinely like the only man on earth, the last man, the first man. It amounts to the same thing that far out. The first night was perfect. The sky performed exactly as promised. David shot for hours, barely slept, woke at dawn to pack down and rest. The solitude felt earned. The second evening, before sunset, he noticed a small pile of stones sitting directly in front of his tent door. 3 stones, stacked deliberately, the largest on the bottom. He studied them for a moment, told himself he must have missed them when he set up, though he had swept the tent site carefully, as he always did. Told himself a small animal had disturbed the ground, left them where they were, and went back to work. On the third morning, the stones were gone. In their place, sitting neatly in the center of the swept dirt where the stones had been, was a small carved wooden figure, no bigger than his index finger, crude in form, clearly hand-carved with a blade, not machined or bought in a shop. No face, no distinguishing features beyond its vague human shape, and a smell, sour and rotten and deeply wrong, like something that had been soaking in still water for too long. He picked it up, then immediately set it back down. His hands were shaking, not from cold, from something more fundamental. He was miles from anyone, miles from a road. He had seen no sign of another person since the first day. This object did not fall from the sky. Someone had been here. Someone had taken the stones away and put this in their place, and they had done it in the night while he slept, close enough to his tent to reach down and touch the dirt 6 inches from his door. David decided to leave. He began breaking down camp with the efficient urgency of someone who has made a decision and intends to stick to it. But the desert had other ideas. A sandstorm came out of the southwest, the kind that springs up with almost no warning, the kind that scours paint off cars and turns visibility to 0 within minutes. The wind hit with a sound like a freight train, and the sand came with it, and David had no choice but to retreat inside his tent, seal every seam, and wait. The storm was loud. The tent walls shuddered and snapped. Sand hissed against the fly with a sound like static. He lay in the dark and waited, watching the light die outside, watching the tent shake, trying to do math about how long these storms typically lasted and whether he had enough water to outlast it. That's when he heard the whistling. Not wind noise shaped by geography into something human adjacent, actual whistling, a tune, upbeat, almost cheerful, with a clear melodic structure that repeated and varied the way a person does when they're whistling absent-mindedly. Somewhere outside in the screaming storm, something was whistling a song. The incongruity of it was so extreme, that bright, casual melody against the howling chaos of the storm, that for a moment David's brain couldn't process it as real. It sounded close, then far, then impossibly close again, as though the source were circling him, or as though the sound itself were following rules he didn't understand. The whistling moved. It came from his left, then from directly behind, then from what seemed like directly below, as if it were rising out of the ground. Then it stopped. David had taken out his camera somewhere in those minutes. He didn't remember making the decision, only that it was in his hands and the video recording was running, the small screen glowing in the darkness of the tent. Later, when people reviewed the footage, they could see David's face, white, sheened with sweat despite the cold, his eyes tracking something they couldn't see. Behind him, the wall of the tent was doing something the storm alone couldn't explain. It was bulging inward, slowly, rhythmically, the shape of pressure being applied from the outside, a hand moving, exploring the space. The whistling was replaced by sound that had no language, a low rhythmic vocalization, not singing exactly, not speech, but something in between, with cadence and intention, but no words, in a register and arrangement that didn't sound like anything recorded in any phonetic library. David said afterward, in his short window of partial speech before he stopped speaking entirely, that it didn't sound like a person making those sounds. It sounded like a recording of a person making those sounds, played backwards at a speed that wasn't quite right.
The tent fabric split, not from the wind, from the inside pressure working against it. A tear opened, and through it came a hand, and David, in the moment before he dropped the camera, registered something that shouldn't have been physically possible. The proportions were wrong. The fingers were too long. The skin had the look and texture of something that had been exposed to the desert sun for years too many, cracked, dry, pale as bleached bone. The camera hit the ground. The screen went dark. David was found 3 days later by the search and rescue team that had been alerted by his emergency beacon, activated somehow, apparently automatically, though David had no memory of triggering it. He was 4 miles from his campsite. He was walking in circles, his lips moving without sound, his eyes open but not registering. His camera was not with him. The camera was recovered 6 weeks later by a hiker who spotted it half buried in sand at the edge of the plateau. It had survived the elements. The footage was intact. Reviewers who watched the final frames of that footage, the frames after the camera fell, described the following. The tent, shot from ground level, partially unzipped from the outside, not from the tear, but from the actual zipper, pulled smoothly and deliberately from the top down, and then, framed in the opening, a face looking in. It wasn't the face of anything they expected. It was David's face, his exact face in precise detail, smiling in a way that David himself described as something he had never felt and therefore had never expressed with those muscles. And the eyes, those were wrong. Not David's eyes, not anyone's eyes, just
two round apertures of absolute lightless black in the shape of eyes in a face that was otherwise entirely his. David has not spoken a word since. The wilderness is beautiful, but it doesn't care about you. Whatever is out there in the dark, it was there long before you set up that tent, and it'll be there long after you leave. Stay safe out there. And if this series kept you up at night, like, subscribe, and drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. Good night.